This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review, and what I'm looking at today is 2024's Silent Night, directed by John Woo. I think this is a situation that warrants a little more information about who John Woo is. And he's best known for his more poetic violence in his movies, and that might sound like a contradiction, but having seen Silent Night, I think it fits. Woo is a particularly prolific director and has done, up to this point, 46 movies, the bulk of them in China, but some in the United States as well. His last was 2004's Paycheck. And the thing of it is, I get the feeling a lot of people have not seen John Woo's Chinese films, because speaking for myself, just by hearing people refer to them and citing instances from them makes me feel as if I have, but I haven't. The only John Woo films I've seen are his American ones, movies like Face Off and Broken Arrow, one or two others. So I really don't have an idea. Oh yes, I forgot, Mission Impossible 3. He also directed that. And as a result of not actually seeing his movies, I don't have a real understanding of what a John Woo movie is. I mean, there's the cliche of pigeons all the time in his movies, and that is a common element, no doubt, but that's more a stylistic affectation. It's not how he really directs, though it has almost become a cliche. So much so, in fact, that Joel Kinnaman in an interview was saying something to the effect that he really tried to get pigeons in this movie. Now, whether he was joking or not, I have no idea. But as I said, it's a cliche for John Woo movies. Though there are no pigeons in Silent Night. Though there is a bird, curiously enough. And it feels like an homage to John Woo's tendencies as a director. It's really cute, really odd scene, but it's interesting. Another thing about Silent Night, it is not a Christmas movie, despite events culminating on Christmas Eve. And there's a point to that, namely Brian Godluck, the character played by Joel Kinnaman. His son was killed the day before Christmas, and it's cast a pall over his entire life. Therefore, the Christmas holiday holds significance to his character. But it is not a Christmas movie, the same way Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. In fact, I would argue that Silent Night, while not a Christmas movie, is more of a Christmas movie than Die Hard. At least in the case of Silent Night, you have the title for a start, and also that the story revolves around the holiday. It's not essential to it, but it's an important character in the film in and of itself. That's not the case with Die Hard. It just happens to take place during the Christmas holiday. And speaking of the Christmas holiday, another thing that makes Silent Night more of a Christmas movie is when you see the film open, which is an aerial shot, has to be drone, zooming in to Joel Kinnaman running through an alleyway. He is dressed in one of those ridiculous Christmas sweaters. Once again, a minor detail, but something that links it to the Christmas holiday, much more than in the case of Die Hard. Now, what's at the heart of Silent Night is the idea that there's no actual dialogue. This, when I first heard about it, really impressed me as an idea, because in my head I was imagining that the lead, Ryan Godluck, played by, once again, Joel Kinnaman, couldn't actually talk. That's what I was thinking about, at any rate. And that's the dialogue the movie refers to. In the entire movie, virtually no one talks. There is dialogue, by the way. It's not a silent movie, but it tends to be whispers, tends to be let's say if there's a playground and there are children nearby, you can hear voices. Not necessarily make out what you're saying, but you can hear voices. And there are other instances of dialogue, like over radios, for instance. It's not like a silent movie. But the problem with it is that it's just a gimmick. It doesn't make sense in the context of the movie. We'd be seeing, or maybe hearing is more accurate, the movie through Ryan Gotluck's character, which is to say, he couldn't talk. So therefore, the audience wouldn't be able to speak either. It's an odd idea, but an interesting one. Though what the movie ends up doing is ultimately unsatisfying because it doesn't make any sense. It's established that Brian Gotluck earlier in the movie is shot in the throat. He can't talk. Gotcha. So why is it that we can't hear what anyone is saying? As I said, it's an interesting idea, but I wanted it to be integral to the story, which is to say, how it comes about is part of the story. And it's really not. It's just something producers decided to do. And I think John Woo acquits himself particularly well, but it's a pretty irritating little issue. And in my mind, if they had just, let's say, had him be shot in the head, for instance, instead of the throat, in which case, his hearing is gone. Now you could have occasional sounds filter through, rarely, but you can do it. But on the whole, he wouldn't be able to hear, and he would become the proxy for the audience, which is why you would have other characters not being able to talk as well. That would make sense to me, and it would be very much a part of the story. As I said, his not being able to speak somehow manifests in the audience not being able to hear. It's really strange, and it's made more complicated than it needed to be. Now, the thing of it is, as I said, I've never seen any of John Woo's Chinese language films fully. I've seen clips of them, but I've never seen an entire movie. And I need to do that because I don't think I've seen a single director who handles action in the way John Woo does. It's very phonetic, it's very kinetic, but it's also not overly stagey and pretty. If you've seen any of the John Wick movies, the violence, I feel, is just so overdone, in the sense that it's very beautiful, it's very athletic, it's very balletic, and it just doesn't do the violence a benefit. I mean, it's interesting once you first see it, but as you watch these John Wick movies, it just gets very repetitious. There's no real humanity to the violence. It's just very well choreographed violence for the sake of very well choreographed violence. So on the whole, I don't find them that impressive. Silent Night is another matter entirely. It's very kinetic, but it's also very brutal, and it's not pretty violence. I know that's almost an oxymoron, but I think it's a valid way to explain it. It's not very attractive violence. It's oftentimes brutal and kind of mean, but I think that's the way violence overall should be depicted. And another thing that John Woo does, which I think is pretty impressive, is that he tries to humanize the violence, oftentimes by zooming into a person's face while it's happening, or as a prelude to violence happening. It puts a sympathetic face on the violence, which you don't see a lot in movies. And that's not to say that it's justified, but it humanizes the violence, and I appreciate that. It's also worth mentioning that Silent Night was a box office flop. Now, what's interesting about that is that I don't know how much it ended up earning, because if you go to numbers.com, they have a figure of almost $10 million. It cost, I believe, $40 million to produce, while Box Office Mojo has its earnings at $11 million. In any case, it goes without saying that $11 million is better than $9 million. At the end of the day, Silent Night is an interesting movie, especially if you haven't seen any John Woo movies prior, because I can't speak for anyone else, but it makes me want to seek out more John Woo movies, just to see how his eye has developed and grown as compared to Silent Night, because it is remarkable in terms of its action, set pieces. But it can't be underestimated how the gimmick of having no sound undermines this movie. If there were more of an attempt to actually make it organic to the story, I think it would have worked a lot better. Instead, we just have an affect just to have an affect. It's, in that way, a little underwhelming, though that's not to say Silent Night isn't worth seeing. It is. It's very interesting. The fight scenes are just dynamic. He does some interesting things with cars, as well as motorcycles. But at the end of the day, it doesn't rise above being a bit of a gimmick. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow.